We are now live. We're
live.
You can see me, which is nice. I'm going to turn that off in a minute. I'll give the viewers a sneak preview of this. Look at this. Anyway, this is Masculine Geek number 4. I still sound like shit, but I feel a lot better than I did a week ago. And we're going to dive right in. So let me turn off my video because you don't need to see this the entire time. Just my sexy voice.
The beard was good though. That was a good topic of conversation.
We can continue along with the beard. Absolutely, that's the beard.
No one's
beard,
Rob, but that's all we hope and aim to be.
Rob's beard is just outstanding.
My beard is epic. What can I say? It's all homegrown.
It is. Now, TJ, have you ever tried to do a really long beard?
I have, and it's been, I guess, mixed because I'm not quite sure. After a certain point, it just gets weird to deal with because I don't know. I think after a certain point, you just deal with it differently as far as grooming and all that stuff. And it also just got, I think for me, just itchy. I know you're supposed to use some sort of stuff to get rid of it, but
like a beard balm. Yeah. What I've always found is if whatever you use on your face, I don't know your face. Well, yeah, your face too. But I actually don't use soap on my face. Whatever you use in your hair, you want to go ahead and use in your beard.
Right. And then the other
shampoo and conditioner.
What usually would end up happening is I would get back home from a really long hike, and I would be just about to take a shower, and then I would decide, you know what, I just want to shave.
Like fuck this.
I would pull out my my cutthroat razor like I did this last week. No, it's pretty amazing how it's such a great sensation when you're shaving when you have a beard, because then because if you do it properly and you do the right prep work, your cutthroat will go right through your beard like a knife through butter. You just got to do it right. And so I don't know. It's sort of, some days I like to be clean shaven, but then I like to let it grow out. But if I'm going to have to pick one, I'll pick the beard because I don't have to wake up every morning and shave.
Exactly.
And make sure I don't have that 5 o'clock shadow.
It's a lot sexier for the ladies too. So I mean, there you go.
That's actually an interesting thing because I've talked about it on my podcast, and we might as well talk about it here. The geeks wearing because beards are typically considered a masculine thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
They were.
Geeks, they were. We were men once,
and back in Rob's day, yes, it was men. Yeah.
And so what happened is you had all these geeks and these non-masculine geeks and nerds and dweebs and dorks who they get the neck beard thing going on, and then you got the hipsters that then do the ironically they grow an ironic beard.
Oh, the whole lumberjack thing.
Yeah, they're doing that, or they've got the waistcoat with the tight jeans and the really nice brown leather shoes, and then they've got the nice trim beard where it's like Duck Dynasty, except it's kind of like been stripped of all masculinity.
And they have no idea how to pitch a tent.
Right.
Both figuratively and literally, correct.
Yes. The pants are too tight.
Right. And so I'm thinking, how does a masculine geek like ourselves grow facial hair in a way that conveys vitality and masculinity rather than this guy's so lazy and uncaring about his grooming?
Aaron has it right.
I'll give you a perfect example. Do you guys know Rich Cooper?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Here's a ripped dude who could kick your ass and carries himself a certain way. You just look. He's got another thing is a chiseled face. You don't have a soft face. You're not you work out. Girls can just tell.
Yeah.
But then you have someone who's like perfectly manicured and sculpted, and when your beard smells like perfume because you put additive in it, okay, people are going to figure that out. Plus the clothes, I mean, Rob walks in with his motorcycle jacket and his beard. People are going to say, oh, that's a masculine guy. He doesn't go and get his beard done at Fifi's Nails.
Exactly.
It's just a guy with a beard who's, pretty badass. I think I want to have people being afraid to grow beards if you wanted to.
I mean,
because people will know.
My dream is when I'm like 65, I want to be able to grow a beard like George Bruno. That dude has like everything about that, the way he wears the beard and the way he carries himself. And I've been watching a bunch of his videos on smoking pipes and giving a straight razor shave. it's just all just masculinity, but like class.
Now, are you talking about George Bruno with his current beard, or George Bruno of about a year or so ago when he had the beard down to almost his belly? Which one are you talking about?
Maybe not down to the belly, but like it was coming out like the Santa Claus beard, right?
Okay,
Like,
you
looks like
haven't
Santa
seen the
Claus.
video then.
Oh, so because
he had a video about having long beards, saying that, yeah, when he had his beard really long, the guys loved it, the women not so much.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Which is why it is part of his, I'm just making an assumption about George here, but which is part of why he keeps it short now, is because when he trimmed it up, all of a sudden the ladies started showing up.
That's
and he's
correct.
like, oh, wow, the guys are giving me a bunch of flack going, dude, you cut your fucking beard. But yet the women are going, ooh la la, and that's where he's like, yeah, when my beard was down to chest length, that's a captain's beard. The guys loved it, but the ladies really didn't care for it. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, he was talking about walking through an airport and passing another dude with a really long beard as well, and they just they didn't know one another, but they just nodded like there was like a secret.
Right, because there's like inherent values that in a person, or implicit values when you grow a beard that long. And it's not a hippie, or not hippie, sorry. Hippie or hipster or nerd beard. It's I'm a man and I'm going to grow this thing down to the floor if I want to, because I'm a man.
Yeah.
Well, have you guys, look, let me ask you this. Can you look at a guy and pretty much guess their politics?
Yes.
Yeah. The whole body, for the most part, the whole body shape. Absolutely.
Right. You're not going to get 100% correlation coefficient, but I'd say 80, 85, maybe even 90% of the time. You look at a guy, beard or not, there's so many other tells, just his forearms. Do you see a vein starting to bulge out a little bit? Does he work out?
Yeah.
How is he dressed? How does he carry himself? And I'm not kidding. I go to this. Oh, guys, I got this great coffee shop I go to. If any of you would come visit me, that would be nice. I'll take you there. But that's in theory. But I go to this coffee shop and it's great. But man, do the metrosexuals come in, and these guys are straight. But exactly what TJ described, I saw that this morning. The tight pants, where it doesn't go all the way down to his ankles. And they had red socks with the nice brown leather shoes, but you could still see some of his ankle foreleg skin because he was a pussy. He had perfectly coiffed hair, and he had a sport jacket on. And you look at him like, I don't care. He was like 6'1". I'm like, I don't care that he's 6'1". I know I could take him in a fight. He's weak. You could just fucking sense it. And many other things until. So I absolutely would not worry about, grow a beard. Just don't do the freaking Raleigh fingers. Do you guys remember the baseball picture, Raleigh fingers?
No, that's not ringing a bell for me.
The curly mustache at the end, he'd wax it and have a little curly.
Okay, yeah.
Don't do that.
Right.
Otherwise, grow a beard. But pipe smoking, that's for losers, man. That's for girly men. You live up in Seattle. You live up in Washington area.
No, they don't smoke pipes in Seattle. They smoke cigarettes or they vape.
Oh, you guys have seen Thinking of Vaping. There was a meme or something a little while back about, I don't know, a year or so ago. And it talked about if a guy vapes, he officially does not have a penis. He has a vagina. And I remembered forwarding that around to a few guys that I knew that vaped. And God, talk about pissing somebody off, but it's like, yeah, you're sucking on a glass dick. You'd be more masculine if you were smoking a crack pipe than that thing. It's like, come on, that's for girls and wannabes. Don't if you're gonna use tobacco or something to get a nicotine fix, make it a cigar, make it a cigarette. You chewing tobacco, I don't care, but don't vape. Good God.
The other thing about smoking, or vaping, in my humble opinion, I agree with you, Rob. I think that vaping is not acceptable because it's like, it's almost like ordering a non-alcoholic beer. Why?
Exactly.
Well, because I was going to go to bat for these guys because they're probably trying to not drink or not smoke. I know several guys who vape, and it's actually helped them quit smoking. So I think they care more about the lung cancer than how they
it's
look.
like taking a prescription pill. Like, go do it somewhere that's private. Don't do it in public, and don't flaunt it. Like, you can kind of tell, well, like, when they're doing it because it's part of what they wanted. Like, kind of those people who are like, oh, well, I'm not smoking a cigarette, I'm vaping, so now I don't have to stand within. Well, in our state, you cannot smoke within 25 feet of an entryway or an entrance to a building. So, but vaping, so that then they would just start vaping.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you give somebody credit who was a smoker and then uses vaping to quit smoking more credit than some millennial douchebag who started vaping because they thought it was cool and never were smoking cigarettes or anything else in the first place? Like, their first thing was to vape, not to smoke pipe or tobacco or anything like that.
I'll give credit to a man who is trying to quit smoking, but at the same time, this kind of shifts over into what I was going to say about smoking in general. Is it's all about the context of when you're smoking. If you're just smoking kind of during a smoke break, that's I got my thoughts on that, but I feel like there's, at this point in our society and in our culture, smoking really needs to be confined to certain occasions. So with like cigarettes or whatever, I don't smoke cigarettes, so it's not really my thing. But like
after sex, you mean that you could like? Would that be acceptable?
Jesus, I was taking a drink.
You know what? Through your nose.
Cappy, you got to be careful with that.
I'm just saying.
It's like, if well, I'm thinking, back in the day, it was just considered socially. Just smoking was a part of everyday life. Now
it was even in Hollywood. It was in Hollywood movies.
Yeah, and the thing is, now it's really become a blue collar or millennial thing, from my personal experience. And so my thought on smoking is that if let's say you enjoy cigarettes or you enjoy tobacco or whatever, but you confine the smoking to certain occasions. I guess I could kind of see that. And you pick very, very nice cigarettes. You don't pick like the low grade kind of stuff. But I guess what I see is what I would not recommend and what I don't like is the sort of clearly someone who's just addicted, like they got to have their cigarette break, right?
Oh yeah, it's no longer like a relaxing meditative thing. It's just like this frantic fix. Yeah,
kind of like I was just watching The Longest Day, the 1962 film. At the very end of the film, this guy's just this paratrooper's sitting there. He's killed a German officer, and he just sits there and goes, "Can I have a cigarette?" I've been dying for a cigarette all day, and they have a cigarette and they're sitting there and they're reflecting on the day, and he's like, "Yeah, I killed this German officer, and for some reason he put his boots on wrong, put him on the wrong feet." So like that kind of thing.
The rule you're basically saying here, TJ, is that smoking tobacco requires an event that calls for it, like killing innocent Germans or having sex. Is that basically what you're?
Or walking the battlefields at Gettysburg.
Right.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Yeah. I'm saying if you're fighting in a war, yeah, if you just, or kind of like that scene from Band of Brothers where the artillery shell lands in that foxhole and it's a dud, and Sergeant Limpton grabs a cigarette from the other guy and starts smoking. And he goes, "Hey, Lip, I thought you said you didn't smoke." And he goes, "I don't." Right? Like that's in a moment when it's acceptable to smoke a cigarette, when it's like, I should have just been blown up, but it's a dud. I don't know how to process this. Give me a cigarette, right?
I was going to say after meals, maybe you're at an event hanging out with the guys, golfing, perhaps. I mean, not that I've ever done that.
That's where you get a cigar, right? Like there's certain occasions when you get a cigar.
Yeah.
But I've worked with people who, at 12 o'clock, that was their cigarette break. They would go outside and they would smoke a cigarette and then they'd go inside and all that. And it just seemed almost like it was an addiction type thing. No, I'm not saying I was innocent, because I was out there smoking stogies or cigarillos or something like that. And now I've realized that that's the kind that I was smoking was low class. So I'm not doing that anymore.
Low quality.
Right. Those
The shit you buy at
Swisher
like
Sweets.
convenience store or like
Yeah.
7-Eleven or
it's like
Wawa.
the wino buys it along with his Mad Dog 2020, right? You know,
Yeah.
he's got his Mad Dog 2020, his Night Train. Now he's buying these cheap cigarillos.
With a
Gotcha.
check.
With a check, yes.
No, he's paying for it in exact cash because that's all he has.
Get pennies and quarters, and that's pretty funny.
Well, how's everyone's week?
It's fucking cold over here now.
Well, I had a flat tire coming on the way home. Well, not a flat tire, but something's deflated one of my tires, so I wasn't quite sure if I was going to make it. But good thing is TJ is always prepared for the worst thing to happen. I am a firm believer and adherent of Murphy's Law. It will always go wrong. Everything will go wrong every time.
That is true. So did you have Reese pull you on a sled?
No, what I did is there's these cans that you can buy that will inflate your tires.
Oh,
But
yeah.
There's also a
Fix a
local
flat.
gas. Yeah, there's also a local gas station that offers free air, like those air stations outside the gas station.
We're aware of those. We had those in our day too. There, TJ. They were not new
No,
inventions.
I'm saying that usually you have to pay. This one was free. So I went over there and reinflated the tire. So I get to check tomorrow to see if it's a long-term problem. The good thing is the advantage of living in a small town. I live about 300 feet away from a tire service store. So I just get to walk over there and say, yeah, reinflate the tires.
You should be able to plug it in. I mean, that Fix-A-Flat will last a long time if it's not a serious.
Well, the Fix-A-Flat didn't quite work for whatever reason. I mean, I could try it again in the morning, but it's all, I don't know. But yeah, such is life. And then I have to constantly get the salt off my car. It's a new problem that's living in a rural area where it snows. They put salt all over the roads. And so when you get home, your car's, looking like a German chocolate.
It looks like a salt lick.
Right, exactly. It
Yeah.
looks like a salt lick. It's like I'm thinking I'm going to wake up and see 60 deer outside licking my
Deer
car.
and moose. Fuck yeah. That's funny. How about you? No, go ahead. No, please continue.
Oh, I was about to say, notice I'm still recovering from the cold that I had starting this last weekend, and it seems like it's spread like the plague.
Oh, absolutely. I still have it in my chest now.
Yeah.
It's just post-nasal drip. It's just fucking annoying.
Since we're talking about illnesses, I guess I'll explain the context for mine. So this weekend I was feeling bad. Like I was genuinely feeling like crap. I didn't have a fever, but I had a sore throat. I just was feeling awful. And so I decided to crash. And for the first time in forever, I turned on my Nintendo 64 and I was playing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
You were mentioning that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so so I've had this game. And so last November, they celebrated their 20th anniversary for that game. And you guys are a lot older, so I guess it doesn't really, it's very different. But when that game came out, it was a big freaking deal. I went to a private school, and my 5th grade teacher took a extended period of time out of class to discuss this game and the fact that her son had bought it. Like it was kind of like a big movie event, and we ended up my aunt. And uncle ended up buying it for us, me and my brothers, for that Christmas. And it was kind of like a life-changing event because of how the game was. And playing it 20 years later, I was really struck by the story plot and all this other stuff. But I also realized how I was doing a little bit of research this weekend and later on this week about like Legend of Zelda fan stuff. And I was realizing how alone I am in terms of masculine geeks who like The Legend of Zelda. Because I was looking at people who would do like on YouTube. You can just Google this stuff. But most of those guys, the men who are interested in this stuff are really obsessed with it, are not going to the gym every single day like I am. I'll put it that way. And neither are the girls. So I was just thinking, okay, this is an example of where the masculine geek can come in and explain, why this game is cool and why it's acceptable for masculine men. And what I was doing some research on the game, it was so the original game for the series came out in '86, so right before I was born. And unlike a lot of these sort of hero, white knight saving the princess in the tower and the bad guy and all that other stuff that you see throughout medieval history, these games were developed by Japanese creators over, obviously in Japan. And what I noted is there was a total lack of like the chivalry, courtly love type thing in these games. Like Link, who's the main hero, he's out to save Princess Zelda from the bad guy Ganon or Ganondorf, depending on the game you're playing. But it's entirely from a moral, quasi-religious perspective. There's not, I mean, I don't know what the new games have done, but like there's no romance. He's not like submitting to her or trying to win her favor. He's just doing it because it's the right thing to do. And the game creators originally designed it as a coming of age game for like from boyhood to manhood. So I thought, so I was always wondering what the appeal was of this game compared to a lot of other games of the similar type. And if you play Ocarina of Time, it's the same thing. It's about a young boy becoming a man and taking on all these responsibilities, but you see all the tactical virtues of masculinity in his character. Like he's strong, he's brave, he has to learn to be competent in all these different skills.
He's by himself the entire time.
Yeah,
There's nobody else that really joins him. Yeah, it's a pretty lonely game.
Oh wow.
The other thing I was struck by was how I don't want to say innocent, but what would be the right, like the game Ocarina of Time specifically, but the series is devoid of cynicism that you would see, like it's a series that has been completely because, and thank God it's made by people who are not really affected by Western culture a whole lot, modern Western culture, but it's not really been infected by any of the modern propaganda that's been going on. Like playing through the game, it's like there's not a lot of negativity. There's clear delineation between the good guys and the bad guys and all that other stuff.
It hasn't been westernized. Yeah.
So you have to understand. So there's a beginning of the game where he's a boy because he ends up aging 7 years in the game through just the plot. But at the beginning, he accomplishes some feat, and a girl in the village he's living in says, "Oh, you're now a man." And I thought how radical that would be for a non-playable character, literally a non-playable character in a modern game to say to an actual male character, "You're now a man," or something like that.
I think it's. When did Ocarina of Time come out? He said it was 20 years ago, so 2000. No, 1999. 98. Yeah, I had not been playing it because I was already working and all that, and I took a vacation from video games there immediately after college. But if you're trying to read into Zelda or Link having some kind of masculine virtue, it's not there. It's the reason Zelda is popular is because it was the first major global popular RPG. One could even say action RPG. I don't know if Vince or Rob ever played the Dragon Warrior series or Ultima. Did you guys ever play any of those?
I have not, no.
No, I haven't played them either.
These were your first ones. We're talking 1985, 86 maybe. Certainly predating Zelda. Where you had the concept of hit points and magic points and what is it? Where they kind of borrowed from Dungeons and Dragons and introduced some aspects and created a video RPG. But with Zelda, unlike Dragon Warrior or Ultima, which was very turn-based and the graphics were kind of poor and there was no action. It was, well, I'm going to cast this spell and I'm going to do this attack. And then that round of battle, the computer would generate and commence. You'd lose X number of hit points. The enemy would lose X number of hit points. And then you'd get to set up your battle again. So there was no speed. You could set it down, go to the bathroom and come back.
Aaron,
by the way,
Legend of Zelda was not a RPG.
It was an RPG.
No,
You're
no.
playing
only-
a role.
Oh,
No, but-
hang on a second. Just to let you guys know, Atham wants Clary to know that Zelda is not an action RPG.
Right, it's not. It's the only RPG game in the Legend of Zelda series was the second game, The Adventures of Link. That's the only one. The other ones were it's just a very different system. But and I'm not saying that speaks to the popularity of it. I was just making a couple observations about how, looking back in a retrospective sense, right, Atham just said Zelda is an action adventure third person. Yeah, exactly. I think it was just different from any other game that had appeared before. But looking back on it, I was saying how it avoids a lot of the chivalry type stuff that you would see in other types of games. And really, a lot of the Japanese games, like Mario, is the same thing. You're out trying to rescue the princess, but there's not like this weird love type stuff. And I know Zelda has some of that stuff in that game and others, but it's not really, like I said, it's devoid of cynicism. And I think that almost is what the gamer, I don't really know much about Gamergate, but I think that was part of the anger that people had, was that they were trying to affect the game. They were afraid people were going to affect game series that they had long cherished. I mean, kids who grew up in the 80s on this stuff's kind of a big deal, because it's, all that, frankly, as Vin Diesel said in Triple X, it's all we got. It's the only childhood we had.
He's a D&D nerd, by the way.
Of course.
Yep.
But yeah, I was playing the game, and I haven't finished it yet, because man, I didn't realize. I used to think it didn't take a lot of time to beat the game, but there's apparently a lot of stuff to do. But I don't know. I'm enjoying it. I think it's a lot. Nintendo 64, in my opinion, was the best console. I mean, NES, very close, but Nintendo 64 had I think the problem with a lot of the NES games is they just don't have long-term playability. You play it for an hour and you're like, it was fun, but let's go do something else. Whereas 64, when I was sick this Saturday, in between reading this book on Patton, I was playing Zelda for like 6 hours.
Nice.
While drinking NyQuil.
Yes. I never had the Nintendo 64. The original Nintendo my brother and I had, and we played the shit out of Castlevania. Oh my god, that was great. Yeah. Staying up till 3, 4 in the morning.
Since this is the 20-year anniversary, and you look at RPGs in general, but certainly Zelda, does anyone own a Nintendo Switch?
No.
No one's played. Okay.
What's that?
This it's the latest console from Nintendo. And the flagship game that came with it was Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and single-handedly reinvigorated my interest in video games again. It's handheld, but you can also plug it into a television because it's got a port. It's just a very clever and well-done video game system, in my opinion. But this Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, you compare that to the original Legend of Zelda. The original Legend of Zelda you could play in an afternoon, maybe a full day, and be done within about 8 to 10 hours. The modern games now, to conquer them, whether it's a first-person shooter, an action RPG, which Legend of Zelda is, or any other, they're taking 80 hours to conquer. That Borderlands 2 that I was telling you guys about last week or 2 weeks ago, that I felt, again, horrible and disgusted with myself because of the amount of time I wasted conquering that video game. We're talking weeks of full-time work where it's 2 40-hour work weeks that you have to invest into these games. And I'm wondering, of course, given younger people, they got more time. Also, the work ethic is just going to pot. A lot of people don't work, period. So I could see where that would have a market. People would devour these games and think nothing of sitting on their ass for 20 hours and playing a video game. But I got to say, any guy who has a job or a life or a real masculine beard, a real one, he's got one game should be able to last you for half a damn year, because you're only going to play it at most maybe an hour a night as truly a bit of brain candy and mindless gameplay.
Right. I mean, that's the kind of interesting thing. You're right. It's when I was a kid, you could spend, or at least that was my thought, is just you could spend a whole weekend or you could spend the afternoon playing a video game. But then I got older, and I think I've mentioned this before. I was playing Call of Duty throughout college, and then I just realized I'm not doing anything productive. But I think it's a good way for an adult at our age or older. It's a good way to just pass time or at least relax. When, like I've watched a lot of these movies. I got my DVD cabinet, and I don't have cable Netflix. And I don't really want to spend hours surfing the list, but I can just put on a video game and play it for a couple hours. And unlike a lot of others, there's actual progress, right? At least with the Zelda game. And I think the reason that game takes so long, I was doing a little bit of research on that for this podcast, that the new game, Breath of the Wild, whatever, was intentionally intended to be very open world, where they give you almost no instructions. So, and that's part of, ironically enough, what I didn't have time for this weekend with Ocarina of Time, because I just wanted to go through the game, because I knew I wasn't going to be, once I got better, I probably wasn't going to spend a lot of time playing it. So I pulled out the old player's guide and started going through it, realizing, how many hours I might have spent otherwise trying to deal with all this stuff. But I don't know. It's still a great game to play 20 years on. So I don't know. I was trying to figure out, like, why do I, as a masculine man, enjoy this series and feel so drawn to this series when it draws a lot of men who aren't? And I think that's where a lot of us question, we're really interested in something, but a lot of men, the majority of men, we're the minority. We walk into the room and we realize we're the only one not wearing pajamas.
Yeah, that might happen here every once in a while.
We're wearing a fedora.
Yeah, like I've always, since Ocarina of Time, I've loved the Legend of Zelda series. But I've always been almost hesitant to really do anything more with it or pursue it any further, because I just look at some of the people who are really into it, and I'm thinking, I don't know how I feel about this. Right? I don't want to end up in pajamas in Las Vegas. Like,
well, they didn't put a gun to my head and say, you must become one of us. Become one of us. It was what was the movie? The guy walks in and then realizes, and then just slowly backs away and does. So don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact, and you're out. That's and anyone see Weekend at Bernie's?
It's been a
a long time ago. Yeah.
Okay, never mind. If it's been that old, never mind. I won't. No one will get the reference then.
It's a little too archaic. Yeah. You had to bring it closer to home.
Well, we got an agenda here, or what, Vince?
Well, we were going to continue a conversation what we left off last week. I think it ran a little over 2 hours. We were discussing the state of the sorry state of movies today. And I think we were talking about James Bond. That was one of the last series we were lamenting. And then TJ was going to talk about Zelda, which he has.
Oh, I do want to add something to his Zelda thing, though, that something he said that kind of pricked my ears up, I guess. And TJ mentioned a female character, I guess, telling Zelda or whatever the character's name is, you're now a man. And that kind of struck a chord with me, because it's like, okay, even though this game may have not been as infected with feminism and SJWs and whatnot that we're seeing today, which is kind of what Gamergate was partially about, was, we're trying to create a safe space and be all inclusive, and we need to do all these things to these games and these different series. But to me, and I guess it's part of my background with the red pill where I've been looking more into that as time has gone on. But it's like, oh, we have a female character telling a male character, you're now a man. And it's like, great. That's not what I want. I don't want, I don't need a woman telling me how to be a man or what makes a man or you're now a man type of thing. And it's just like, oh God, it goes all the way back to there even. Jesus.
I would say in the defense of Zelda, the game, Link is surrounded by women who are girls who just love him.
Oh, okay.
Like they're very friendly. And again, guys, I'm not trying to read too much into a video game, but none of them are trying to play the whole Annie Oakley, anything you can do, I can do better type thing. They're all in that sense. Now, that's reflective of the creators, and they're the ones creating the characters, and they're the ones who are creating this world. And so I just thought it was interesting to play a game like that. Looking back, like back 20 years ago, no one would have. I mean, 1998. It's like I'm trying to remember what would have been controversial back then. For, I mean, excuse me, I'm still recovering. I'm just thinking, it wasn't even on anybody's mind. Like all that stuff, like political correctness and all that.
That wasn't on anyone's radar.
That was only in universities. You had to go to a college to be exposed to someone who said, you know, your religion is not true. Oh my gosh, somebody actually disagree. Like, you know what I mean? You'd have to go you have to go to another place to do that. But I think at the same time, I think that's because the people who are creating this game are really not affected. They're not from the West. They're all from Japan, and so they're taking Japanese. And I think that's what's interesting about Zelda and other games like Super Mario. It's a Japanese creation using Western cultural stuff. Like you have a Japanese guys, the guys who created Mario were Japanese. The guy who wrote the music for it was Japanese. They picked an Italian plumber and a blonde as their character. Like, you know, but none of that has anything to do with like romance. It's not like you would see in other games or stuff that you would see like with Walt Disney or whatever. I mean, that's Western cultural stuff with Western people making it. And it's very much that if you watch any of the Disney films, it's there, but you don't see that in Zelda at all. You don't have Link like kneeling before Zelda or trying to seek her favor or whatever. He's just doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's just doing the right thing, right? And killing the bad guys. And then he doesn't go like, you know, seek fair maidens honor or favor or anything like that.
I find that the ideal combination, and not just in video games, but take, for example, the best Japanese anime, Cowboy Bebop, is where the plot or the writing, and in Cowboy Bebop, the music was heavily, if not outright American or Western. But then the art itself is Japanese with a little bit of Japanese oversight. And Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, I think is another perfect example of that, where there's no, oh, my fair lady, I'll come save you. There's none of that Disney stuff, nor is there the politically correct where, oh, hey, now you get to play Princess Zelda and you go save Link and he's emasculated and all this other gay shit. It's not, he's masculine, he's doing his thing. There's the bad guys, but the artwork and the actual gameplay, I think Nintendo, and obviously influenced by Japanese culture, but I think Nintendo is brilliant when it comes to making actual games. And so when you take some and draw some American or Western influence into a game like that, and Mario Brothers as well, Lord knows how many tens, perhaps hundreds of billions of dollars the Mario Brother franchise has brought in, you get this great mix. But then, God almighty, what was the video game where it was on its third or fourth rendition? It was put out by BioWare. And by the fourth rendition, the people had gotten so ugly and so social justice warrior. Because the first one, you go back, it's a hot chick with big tits, and the guys are ripped and buff and everything. Second one, not so much. Third one, what's going on? Fourth one, they're outright fugly. because these goddamn American programmers, all they can think about is their goddamn politics. And it sold horrible. I'm trying to realize
Of course it did.
game or something like that.
Nobody gives a shit about that.
Right.
The
Or
people that do are it's infinitesimally small.
Now this came straight from Japan, but it didn't make it to the shores. It's a volleyball game with a bunch of scantily clad girls, and because no, not Tomb Raider. It's a volleyball game with girls dressed in bikinis, and same thing. Go back to its first version. I don't know what version we're on now, 4 or 5, whatever. Basically, you play all these different girls. And they play volleyball. And then as they win, I guess they get different bikinis or different outfits. And then they play more volleyball. Whatever that game was, it was now on its 5th or 6th incarnation. And the social justice warriors here in the United States said, we don't want that. You can't have it. It's sexist. It's demeaning to women, blah, blah, blah. And so now this is the first version that there is no English version coming to America of. And so it just shows you the Japanese are like, yeah, we're going to play a fun game. And okay, some of it's not going to be your cup of tea, but we're going to make a quasi pornographic volleyball game. And you guys can have it too. But here we are, land of the free, home of the brave. Oh no, we can't have that. So it's sad to see what's happening to a lot of the video games. Like I have a hard time playing a lot of video. Like I'm not going to buy BioWare. I'm not going to play Battlefield 5. I'm not buying any EA games. Because of all the politics that's in them now.
Right. I think the thing about one thing I would note is that with Nintendo, you've had the same major players there with the company right now since the beginning. One of them is I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, but Shigeru Miyamoto. He's the one who created Zelda, Super Mario Brothers, Star Fox, all these different games. And then Koji Kondo, I think that's his name. But he came up with all these great music. I think he's still with the company, but basically they still have the same big players with this company since the beginning. And maybe they'll stray in terms of game quality and all that, especially with the Super Mario Brothers series. But I think that they're removed from the politics that's going on here because, what are they going to do? Lecture them about their white privilege? They're going to look at them like, yeah, we don't care. Like there's nothing.
It's not their culture. They're homogenous. They're a homogenous society. They don't give a shit. They're like, fuck you. I guarantee you they're over there laughing at the United States in terms of our racial politics. It's like, yeah, no, we're not going to have any of that. We're not gonna
and then what's fun, the thing is though, the Japanese culture just won't care about them accusing them of not having enough inclusivity because, it's just a totally different, they've gone on a totally different path, even though they're also dealing with low fertility rates. It's not been the hostility that's going on here. They're dealing with other stuff, but I guess there's not going to be any pressure from anybody in Japan for him to pander to a bunch of people that they consider to be a bunch of freakish foreigners in America. And it's not going to hurt sales either because social justice warriors they've always been anti, what's good for the business. They're parasitical. They're not there to. They're
not gamers either.
They can't afford the games anyway.
Well, no, but what they do is they go into an organization and they converge it and they turn it into
cancer.
It's no longer about putting out a great Zelda game. It's about putting out a Zelda game that promotes social justice.
Yeah.
Right.
Where Zelda, I think that leaves a large market for Japan if any Japanese video game or any video game developer wanted to make just a good old straight up World War II video game or shooter game without a roundhouse kicking chip cop girl, without just a video game. Here's a market for all the video game companies in the world. Video games without politics. Try that. Historically accurate. And you know what? By the way, anyone wants to take the crack at a movie and make an apolitical movie? Movies and entertainment without politics. I mean, imagine if there'd be a market for that.
Well, I think that's what was the appeal for me of Ocarina of Time was I was able to go and enjoy something that was just completely devoid of politics. in every way, shape, or form, because that's my whole life. That's literally what I do for a living. And that's also what everything now that you see is touched by politics. Whereas the 90s, I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on this, because I was a youngin', I wasn't out on my own. I was in my own little world. But to me, the 90s was almost, I don't want to say apolitical, but it was a free, you didn't have to, there was no sense for art to be political or video game. Like politics was not, it was almost like art and entertainment was separate from politics.
Well, I would say that has a lot to do with the internet.
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
The internet, I didn't get into the internet world until about 1998. And even then, I mean, you had static HTML files, you had forums and bulletin boards, and it was very, very
Porn
basic.
took way too long to download back then.
It did. It would take you 5 days to watch one video. And even then you couldn't do anything. It's just like, huh? So, but yeah, I would attribute that to the dawning of the digital age.
No, it goes even before that, Vince.
You think so?
Oh, I know so. When I was in college, my first year of college was in 1990, and it's kind of interesting that you guys are talking about this, because it brings up something I remember. We had the local college campus newspaper. It was called the Signpost, and one of the guys that year in 1990, he was like a sophomore or a freshman or something, but he'd just gotten on with the Signpost. Well, he wrote an article that was a humorous article, and it was something like 10 reasons why my bicycle is better than a girl. Okay. And he listed all the reasons. And one of them I remember is that you can drag your bike through the mud and it won't complain. Okay. And yeah, and everybody had a chuckle, everybody had a laugh, and you chucked the newspaper in the garbage or the recycle bin or whatever, and you moved on. Well, fast forward to 1994. And granted, yes, the internet was around, but for me, at least, everything was dial up. If you wanted to download a pornographic picture, it was in binary. Okay. You had to have some kind of software to decode it. So it was always a mystery. What are you downloading? Are you downloading some tits and red hair, or are you downloading a cock? You didn't know you got it.
Jesus.
Okay. And honestly, back then, back in the very early 90s, while the internet was around, you had the IRC chat rooms, you had the forums. But honestly, I really thought, and there was a lot of other people that felt the same way I did. We honestly thought that the internet was kind of like a fad, like, it's this new thing. But it's there's going to be some people that are going to get into it, but it's not going to be what we have today.
That's true.
How wrong I was. Anyway, fast forward 1994, and there was other stuff that I was noticing my senior year, because in probably late 93, early 94 is when what I call the thought police and the diaper corps showed up. And these were the people that were the prototype to the SJW that we have today. There was an incident I remember where I got called a sexist because I was talking to another student about if you were in a movie theater and someone yelled fire, people would go nuts, and it's every man for himself. And she was like, hey, we're not going to have any of that sexist language here. Well, anyway, the Signpost guy, getting back to my point, he now went from one of just the journalists or the writers or whatever. He's now like the editor of the Signpost. Well, it's finals time. Everyone's getting ready to graduate. He's got deadlines to meet. And so what does this guy do? He takes that article, that 10 reasons why my bicycle is better than a girl, and he republishes it so that they've got something in the kind of the op-ed, the section that it needed to be in. They needed filler. So he takes this article from 1990, doesn't change anything about it, puts it in the paper, and people lost their fucking minds over it.
Really?
They had fucking protests over it. They wanted him to. Yes, there was a protest on campus. I think there was all of 10 people that showed up to protest it, but they actually had people with picket signs and calling him a sexist and a
Any pink pussy
misogynist.
hats?
No, that again, this is the prototype to that. It was, there was no vagina pictures at that point.
Oh, okay.
But it's the idea they wanted him to resign from his position on the paper. They wanted him to fail the class because he was getting class credit for being part of the school newspaper, just like I was getting class credit to be on the radio station that was up there. They wanted him to publicly apologize and on and on and on. Well, to give this guy credit, because I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, I remember that article from like 4 years ago. Yeah, it was funny then and it's funny now. But back then, nobody gave a shit. In 1994, oh boy, 10 people plus, everybody freaks out about it. And to give this guy credit, he did not back down. He did not apologize. He stood his ground and was like, it's a fucking joke, you guys. Get over yourselves. Okay. But you guys are talking about, oh, it's the internet and it was like the late 90s. And it's like, no, this shit was going on back in the early to mid 90s because that was one of the things that I was glad that I graduated when I did, because probably about late 93, early 94, to me, that's when the diaper corps showed up and was trying to start correcting everybody's behavior. And you can't say this and you can't do that, and this is misogynist, and this is sexist, and I'm sitting there thinking, fuck you.
Yeah,
So I was glad that it's like, oh God, I'm glad I'm getting out of here when I am, because it's becoming a shit show, and it's just gotten worse as time has gone on.
Right, but I think that stuff now, they're going to go after a 5-year-old for saying, whereas kind of like what we, I don't want to sidetrack, but just saying how that stuff you had to go to college to deal with.
Right.
But back then, I said stuff back in the 90s as a 5th grader, 6th grader, that if I said now at that age, there'd be a social media like meltdown, and like people would be picketing my house or whatever. But if it was recorded and uploaded. And so that's why I was saying how back then, there wasn't this need to have. Now it's almost like it's got to be in everything, as people have told me. I think Cappy's even talked about, or maybe it was somebody else. Sorry, who they were watching a TV show and just there was the SJW nonsense just tossed in there for good measure. And it's like, stop screwing around with this stuff. And so it's almost like you got to go back that far to find something that they haven't tarnished.
I was going to say the mid to late 90s was about the last time you could have gone to college and had it actually been quote a college experience that was not political. Certainly there was a bias with your teachers, and sure, your liberal arts people were all, oh yeah, man, everything's peace and wonderful and all that. But I remember you could have a dissenting opinion, or it wasn't a shocker if there was a Republican or that. I remember attempting to kiss a girl at a party one time, and she gave me the cheek, and I did not get dragged off to jail for assault. Matter of fact, I must have tried to kiss more. I've gotten the cheek more than one time in my life. I must have sexually assaulted many women in the past, trying to kiss them without a fucking signed consent form. But anyway, I feel sorry for young people today because much as I did not like college, and college was a waste of time and all that, at least there was on the part of the staff, I'd even say, the defense of the freedom of speech. Like, you could have a differing opinion.
Yeah.
Now it is, you better have this opinion. And it's not only that, that's all this is about. Like, this is the ultimate thing that the college
there's no learning.
There's
no learning.
It's been replaced by politics. You absolutely, this is why you're here, because there's articles, I think it was Purdue's engineering program. They have now as their dean a woman with a doctorate in diversity and inclusion or something like that.
For fuck's sake.
And they're trying to like include diversity and all this other shit into the physical sciences. It's like, bitch, step off. That's not physically possible. That's not only not possible in engineering, it's not possible anywhere. But if you want to try and spread that bullshit, go to the liberal arts, because it's amorphous, it's not identifiable, it's intangible, and you can obfuscate and lie. So go there with your dumbass politics. But that was the sad thing. Is like today, you couldn't just simply be a finance major. You simply couldn't be an accounting major. You simply couldn't be an electrical engineering major. You are going to get, no matter whether you want it or not, and it's going to be everywhere, some dose of a leftist type of politics. And no doubt it'll be about gender, certainly environmentalism, social justice, and caring for your common man and all that other bullshit. And it's sad. Me, Rob, and Vince are probably the last generation to have it. Yep. And the other thing I would also like to point out is this is squarely on Gen X. I know we like to rip on the millennials and point them as the social justice warriors, but Gen X are the original social justice warriors. They are the proto social justice warriors. And now they're in the colleges and universities. And it was clear, and they were there, and it was obvious they simply did not want to work. And now it's come full bloom, but the internet itself has made this allowed to spread much quicker than
it's like wildfire.
Before.
It's like pouring gasoline on a wildfire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because think about this. Let's go back to, Rob's example is perfect. 1990 versus 1994. The campus got its tits in a sling over a funny, stupid, haha joke of an article. Do you guys remember in Baraboo where you had those dumbass kids doing the quasi fake, don't really know if they're doing it or not, Sig Heil sign, the Nazi
head? Oh yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, and how the fucking world that made it into European and Asian newspapers, that bullshit, that truly unnewsworthy event was the #1 article. And people wasted trillions of humans of hours on that stupid event that, hey, a bunch of dumb kids did a bunch of stupid thing or did one stupid thing.
The total clickbait. Absolutely. It was a waste of fucking time.
And so now that the internet is here, I wonder if there's any analog decision anymore on the part of a human being to determine for him or herself whether this is worth their time or is relevant or newsworthy or germane. Is this important or not? And now it's just like, oh no, it's from second to second to second, like Scrat chasing after his acorn. They never sit down and fucking focus and figure out, is this worth getting sand in my vagina or not?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. I mean, when you think about it, when you're with your phone, you have the Library of Congress, the knowledge on your hip, your purse, your satchel, whatever the fuck you have, and you focus on this bullshit. It's draining. It's fucking draining.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead, TJ.
I was just saying what I really like about entertainment or art from previous times is that they were just there wasn't this, you're talking about outrage on just ordinary behaviors and all that stuff. I'm just saying how even in like geek culture, there was this, it was just devoid of politics. And that's what one person said, that the enjoyment, like the classic example is Star Wars. Star Wars was a apolitical film series that had a lot of interesting philosophical concepts, just like Lord of the Rings had the concept of the ring. The ring could only be used for evil. You had the Force that could be used for good or evil. And you had, depending on how you used it, and you could go over to the dark side or you'd be on the light side and all that. The Rebel Alliance, you had the Empire, and people could read into that all they wanted, but there was nothing in those films to suggest that they were trying to make current political commentaries or social or cultural commentaries. It was just literally.
I would argue there were none.
Yeah. It was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but somehow set in the future. But the point was that there was no politics. So anybody could go enjoy that stuff and not feel like they were being lectured. Whereas now you watch stuff in that same series or in other stuff, and the politics
mandatory. It's mandatory.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that is because of the internet. Or is it just we got so much money coming out of our wazoos and kids have been thoroughly indoctrinated at college? I mean, it could be that too.
Well, think about how long it would have taken. I mean, the thing about the internet now is that it allows people like us to connect, people who have mutual interests and mutual values to connect. It also allows the outrage police the outrage, the social justice mob to mobilize and to attack. I mean, if they can find out if there's a newspaper that has an online presence in some backwoods town in Missouri where some kid says something funny that's politically incorrect, they can find out about it and they can turn it into an international event. They could also later get laid off in mass, which is what happened.
That's hilarious. So it basically provides them fuel for the outrage. If we had an analog press, an analog media, where you actually had to go dig it up, and Bob you have to have 3 witnesses to confirm it, only the truest of true newsworthy events would make it to the top. Now, because the internet is so powerful in such capacities, I say you can constantly be offended. This is why I don't watch news anymore, because I can constantly be offended by leftist dumbass shit happening. Choose your poison. I'm sure something dumb happened today, but you can then have a choice as a sane realist who wants to get on with his life. You can say, I'm going to ignore all this. This is e-drama. This is bullshit. This is People magazine. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. Go do something more important. Go outside and play. Go outside and play. That's basically what you want to say. You could do that. You can go outside and play. Or you could sit there on your damn phones and stew and find every possible transgression, which I'm not even saying didn't happen.
You just look for shit to be bothered about. Exactly.
Right. To feel oppressed. And that's why that, I think, gives them the fuel and thereby the authority or legitimization to say, we have to do something. I love it where women are oppressed. It's like, in this country? I guess women are oppressed in Iran, but are they oppressed here, you're saying? And it's like, yeah, look at what happened. All these minute, petty things that are, and so I could see where that now puts them on.
It's just
right.
This guy has his legs spread apart 2 more inches than he is.
This dude, this horrendous piece of shit smirked at me. How dare he?
I know.
Oh God!
You got to be kidding me.
That's the point that that shows the difference between our society then and 20 years ago when these games were coming out. That the other thing. Here's another difference.
Finish your thought, TJ. What was your original thought?
I'm gonna switch over because this is a better point. How I don't know if you read, but some moron at the New York Times was talking about how Mary Poppins flirted with blackface because they have the chimney guys, the chimney sweeps, stepping time or whatever that is. They were saying how that's racist or whatever. I was thinking, imagine what they will do to games like The Legend of Zelda. I mean, that's where it's going to be interesting to watch how normies and regular geeks react when someone says the Legend of Zelda series is sexist and we need to change it or we need to get rid of it. And then suddenly all hell breaks loose because everybody loves it. I mean, I don't want to say girl geeks because I don't really think that there are as many of them as we would believe.
They're a myth. They don't exist.
Right. They're unicorns.
There's people posing. Oh my God. Hey guys.
They get hired. They're hired.
Right.
It's just thoughts with a webcam and a controller in their hand. That's all it is. It's just fucking thoughts.
I mean, I have met some who are genuine fans, but my point is it's a very non-masculine people love that series, and so for them to go after it. But think of how if we had these current politics now back then, they would have torn apart everything. Like they've gone after Super Mario for being sexist, for promoting patriarchy because it's Mario rescuing the princess and she's royalty and that's classism, and Luigi's taller than Mario that's promoting physical supremacist type
it's heightism
or whatever. So I guess my point is they will end up ruining good art, and they will end up ruining hobbies and interests that we really enjoy. I mean, imagine what they would have done back then, because they're doing that stuff now where they're going after. I mean, they're running out of things to complain about. And so they're like trying to figure out anything. It's like they almost kind of like that South Park episode that showed how Family Guy comes up with their jokes. It's just a completely random process with dolphins, right? It's like that's how they come up with their outrage.
Well, and to go off with what you just said there, TJ, about if they would have done this 20 years ago, my thoughts, to kind of go off of that is 20 years ago, if they would have tried, there would have been enough guys, I guess, enough masculine men around that would have just been like, no. I don't think so.
True.
They would have taken the women, if it was the women that were bitching and moaning, they'd have taken them over their knee and slapped them on the ass and spanked them and said, there, now run along, go be a good little girl, go play with your dolls and go do something else, but let the men do the men shit. Leave it alone.
We also would have used the word womanhood.
Right.
I'm sorry, woman folk. You woman folk go back over.
Yeah.
We use that.
No,
Woman
I
folk.
I think the other
woman
thing is,
folk.
I think that's part of the problem where we're seeing it run rampant today. Is it's kind of like there was a protest or something. You guys probably all know about it. It's been a little while, but it's the rape refugee thing with the Somalis or whatever coming from whatever country, and they're going into Great Britain and they're raping the women. And instead of the guys picking up battle axes, guns, or whatever other type of weaponry they have to, defend what's theirs, they're putting on skirts and pantyhose and putting on high heels going, we're trying to empathize with women. We're going to walk in their shoes. And that's just the state of things that's why it can get where it is today. That's why we've gotten where we are today in a lot of cases, in my opinion, is because all the fucking guys are soy. They're fucking pansies. And so they're too pussified to do anything about it except virtue signal and bitch and moan about it on fucking social media.
Well, and I think
I would say there are some men that is certainly the case, and an increasing amount. And the younger you go, the higher the percentage. But there's a lot of men who are still masculine, who don't like their country being invaded, who want to protect their country and their women folk, to use the parlance. But their hands are tied, because the second you do, and let's remember, this is why I can forgive any guy, because the second you try to pick up arms, or in Britain a battle axe, and go and defend your women folk or your culture or your country, you have to remember that your women folk in your country, the majority of them, voted in these laws that if you were to pick up a battle axe or a gun or you get arrested or something, you get arrested. Some big guys with much more stronger battle axes than you and guns will come and arrest you. So the true masculine man has to one, just sit, grin, and bear it. But I think the true masculine man learns to get beyond it and not let it anger him anymore, because he doesn't control it. He did what he could. He voted whichever way he could. And now that society is going to arrest him if he does anything outside of the law, or they pass laws that now make it impossible and tie his hands and doesn't allow him to protect his family or women folk or country, then you got to say, I don't care. I give up. Enjoy the decline. Fuck it. And, to quote Terrence Popp, Space Ghost.
Herpagona syphilades.
And you're right, Cappy, on the sense that in all this regard, and Rob was making good points as well. I think the other thing is that back then it would have been throwing the frog into the boiling water that's already boiling, as opposed to warming it up. And so people would have said, imagine if you went back in time and showed a 1990s lefty what the future was going to look like. They would have pulled the brakes on a lot of stuff, I think.
I would agree, yeah.
And they were
horrified.
We're kind of already seeing that where a lot of people who were on the left are now becoming either to the center or the right. And it's not that they changed their mind. They just didn't change their mind. That was the problem.
They voted for Bill Clinton, the rapist. The one who, that guy. That's
right. And
anyway, so listen, guys, I got to get going. I got to catch a bus. All right.
All right.
Thanks for having me on.
See you, Aaron.
Enjoy your bus ride.
And what was this? Oh, we were talking about the political stuff. And I think that's where the next thing that they're going to go after, because right now we have nostalgia, and that's, I think, why they're going after Mary Poppins, right? Because they don't want us to, not only do they have to control what's going on in entertainment, hobbies, and interests in the future, they got to go and rewrite the past. And so they got to say, Mary Poppins, you shouldn't be showing that movie to your kids. You should be showing them Frozen or any of the new stuff that we're giving. But that's racist because they had soot all over their face, and that's racist.
Yeah, because they were cleaning the fucking chimney.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
idiots.
I'm like, I'm sure that's exactly why all those chimney sweeps went and did their jobs, because they just wanted to stick it to the non-existent black population in London.
Unbelievable. It
Well,
defies.
it's a people who've run out of things to complain about.
Well, yeah, they got to make shit up. It's just like if you have a platform, you base your political your narrative, your platform, and it's in its genesis and it starts and it's new. No one knows about it, and people give it money, they give it credence, they give it a voice, and it continues, and then it does what it needs to do, and then it should die out. Everyone, gets out of the pool and fucking goes home.
Yeah,
No,
like the abolitionist movement.
exactly.
They didn't.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. They didn't continue that. They're like, all right, we're done. We break this up and we go back to our lives. We don't continue to make shit up to fit the narrative that doesn't exist.
Right. And the ironic thing is the abolitionists would have had a much better argument for why they should keep going at that time than these.
Yeah, that's true.
Their grievances
keep the money coming in.
Yeah, and their grievances people today have never been and they were never valid to begin with, but that's a separate topic. But as far as like we've kind of been going down this rabbit hole as far as the political stuff, but I'm curious about how, I guess, Vince, you were going to talk about, I think, Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
And because I've always been interested in him. I've kind of gone back and forth because on one hand, I grew up reading about him and, charging up the San Juan Hill and all these great quotes, like that one from Red Dawn where he says, far better to be with men who, I can't remember what it was, but, than to be with cowards who know neither victory nor defeat.
Well, when he recruited for his regiment, as it were, when they were going over to Cuba and they were training, he recruited salt of the earth, dregs, outlaws, cowboys. No, he completely did. And he gave them discipline, and these guys became a cohesive fighting unit. And he's like, I don't fucking care about your past. I care about now and what your dedication. And it's the band of brothers. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Right. And he was a voracious reader, from what I understand. I think Art of Manliness they've done a bunch of series on him because he's kind of like their, the epitome of like masculine. I mean, what's funny is people always talk about, and especially from my philosophical background, people always get hung up on the politics. And I'm always thinking, okay, you got to look at other stuff. Teddy Roosevelt, like the epitome of masculinity in the White House, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And whatever you want to think about his politics or his viewpoints or stances on stuff, no coward resigns from the Navy, joins goes and volunteers to go charge up some hill in this battle where there was actually significant casualties, and he was doing it himself, and he would swim in the middle of the winter in the Potomac, and the Secret Service would have to follow him, and they hated him for it because it was freezing cold. And he hunted in Africa and the safari and ran a ranch and did all this stuff.
He purchased 2 ranches. When he was younger, he suffered. He was like really very spindly, very weak. He had horrible asthma. Suffered from a variety of ailments, and his father was like, "Look, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here. You have a strong mind. You need a strong body. You need to build your body. You can do this, but you need to build your body. I can't do this. No one else. Only you can do it." And he started boxing. He started working out. He started running. And at first, it just like it completely crushed him. He's like, "No, I'm going to do this," and he did. He was interested in zoology, taxidermy. He set up his own little taxidermy thing in the house. He always had books with him. When he went over to Egypt with his family, he took his rifle with him so he could shoot fowl and make his little taxidermist models. The book I'm reading is from 1919. It's amazing. Right. I'll have to, when I'm done with it, I'll send it out to you so you can read it. But I do want to do an article on it, an in-depth article on his life. I mean, he's a police commissioner, and some of the stuff that he completely revamped the civil service and taking civil service tests and promotions based on merit. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable, man.
He was also an unspoken, or not unspoken, outspoken nationalist in terms of yeah. If you're gonna be like I mean, I read some of his stuff back then, and I'm just like, dude, we need a guy to speak this language. Where he's like,
oh, absolutely.
You're American. I think he was the one who said, someone's saying that they have equal loyalty to this country and another is like saying, you have equal loyalty to your wife and your mistress or something like that. Like, you have one loyalty, your fundamental loyalty. I'm not big into the bumper stickers, but I've got the America First thing on my car, which ironically, for the first time, somebody came up to me today and asked me where they could get one of those themselves.
Oh, okay, cool.
But Teddy Roosevelt would have been all over that. But what I was really fascinated by was the fact that this guy just read any book he could pick up. Oh yeah, and wrote too. He wrote a complete naval treatise that is just used to this day. Yeah. So yeah, it's and the funny thing is his monocle, which he got because for most people don't know, he got because he had a boxing match, and I think it hurt. Well, yeah, he was a boxer too. Quick side tangent. Most people, I'm assuming some people here have heard about Abbott and Costello. Oh yeah. So I believe it was Lou Abbott. He was a boxer. He was a boxer too. Yeah. Yeah. And so you have all these guys who kind of seem goofy, but these guys were fighters. Like they were masculine men, and they weren't effeminate. Even though they were, Lou was kind of like the butt of a lot of jokes in the movies. He was still a masculine guy. Oh yeah. He just played a kind of a goofball in the movies. Yeah. I think they both grew up here in New Jersey, up in North Jersey. So they're from the area. What was some of the stuff that that struck you about Teddy Roosevelt, as far as like his writing, but hobbies or interests of his that were more what we would call geekish today? But here's a guy who could probably kick the living crap out of most people he encountered. Oh yeah. And then, but then after he did, he would just smile and say, and then shake your hand, and then you go have a drink. Yeah, exactly. So, I was chatting about this with the guy the other day, last night. We were saying how back then you would get into a fist fight with a guy, and afterwards it's just like no animosity. You would just go and shake each other's hand, and you would go get a drink or whatever. Like there wasn't this, simmering hatred or anger, and we agreed that it was like just a lot of repressed anger over other stuff that people channel when they finally get into a fist fight. Oh yeah. Like we were discussing the need for people to get, especially for men, masculine or not, to get into a fist fight occasionally, and resolve their differences in a physical confrontation. Even though people might think that that's evil, it's like, you're blowing off energy that needs to be, it has to happen.
Well, and you learn something about yourself too. If there's a lot of guys I work with that are in their mid to late 20s, and they've never been in a physical altercation as far as, balling up their fists and actually punching and getting punched. Right. And when you get hit, at least my experience was, oh, okay, yeah, that was interesting. And later, after the adrenaline wears off and whatnot, then you realize, okay, that actually hurt.
Yeah, it's a very
after, but during the fight thing. Yeah, but during the fight, I know when I got hit because I could feel things kind of go numb. I could feel things happen, but I realized, oh, I'm not going to shatter. I'm not going to break. Right. And so you realize, God, I'm actually more resilient than I thought I was.
Exactly.
And then the idea of getting into another fight, if another one were to come up, it's not that big scary thing as much as it was before that first time.
That's true.
The other thing is you earn the respect of others who are either watching or the person you're fighting, because they realize even if they had a reason to want to punch you, you're not like,
you're still defending yourself. Yeah.
You're not keeling over and crying like a little baby and going to mommy. And not that this has to do necessarily with being a masculine geek, but that's the problem with a lot of these kids today in high school is that they get picked on and they have no way to prove themselves. They have no way to say, let's say they're getting teased or mocked or whatever, or they're getting picked on by somebody who just it would be politically incorrect for the school to actually do anything about it. The kid has no way of like challenging them to a fight. And then even if he loses, he's shown that he's got guts, right? Because he's a small kid and he earns respect from other people. Like kids, like boys, have no way to earn the respect of other boys in high school in that manner. And that's the only way that really matters is if they know if you can take a pummeling and you'll get back right up and go to class and not cry and not say a word. That shows that you've got guts and you've got spirit, and people respect that. Even if you're not the best fighter, even if you
just stick that tissue up your nose to staunch the bleeding, and you go back to class.
And more importantly, if you don't say anything to the teachers, or you don't tattletale on the kid, they're like, "Oh, that kid has got balls."
He's a stand-up guy.
Yeah, we're gonna, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna go teach him how to actually throw a punch. And we're going to invest in this kid because he's shown that he's got the spirit, you know, he's got the thing. So
he's got heart.
Yeah, he's got heart. Kind of like Teddy Roosevelt. You know, he wasn't born with a great body, and his dad told him that, and he ended up eventually, you know, he had to build his own body.
Frankly. He did. He had to build himself up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's the thing is Teddy Roosevelt, because of that and because of all of his life experience, he had a total the only person I think who hated cowardice more than Teddy Roosevelt was General Patton.
Oh, yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt told his sons, "I would rather you would die before you'd be a coward."
Mm-hmm.
And that's some harsh word. And of course, I was just watching The Longest Day, which involves his son landing on D-Day. And he's like, "I gotta go." You're like, yeah, that chat with Daddy 30 years before really had an effect.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
but yeah, getting back to your original question and about Teddy Roosevelt when he was like the geek things he was interested in, just a conglomeration of things. They had the interest in taxidermy. He and his friends created their own little museum. Their zoological club. You know, he went out hunting. He read. He started writing at a young age. All that together just completely fascinated me.
So what have you gathered from it as far as, I guess, for the audience, besides that it's a fascination for you in general? What could you take away from it and, you know, say, hey guys, here's a tip from Teddy Roosevelt. What would you think it would be?
Well, he always was a proponent of what he called the strenuous life. Because at the time, he felt that masculinity was being overrun by an overly feminine, civilized society. Not that there was like progressively anything wrong with that, but he realized that it was making men soft. And they needed to be grounded in who they were and make sure that they continued with their strength, you know, and keep that up and not lose sight of that fact. And it's easy to be comfortable. It's easy to be warm and safe. But in times of stress and times of crisis, what do you do? Who do you turn to? The only person you can turn to is yourself. And you have to be able to save and take care of your family. So he was a huge, he was a very big advocate for getting outside and doing things outside. And living a strenuous life, giving yourself a little bit of hardship to build that up, to make you a stronger human being, a stronger man. And that completely fascinates me. And I think we're lacking in that. We're too soft. I mean, technology is great. Yeah, technology is great. I love the fact that, you know, whenever I want, I can reach down to my hip or wherever I have my phone and go look something up. I could read something. I could find something out. I can make money. We're living in a fucking science fiction novel. Absolutely. But at the same time, anyone listening to this, anyone who goes back and listens to this, whatever, or the people that are viewing, go look at yourself in the goddamn mirror. Are you happy with what you see and how you comport yourself on a daily basis? Is that okay with you? I know you're doing all your geek stuff. You're doing whatever you're doing. Are you okay with who you are? Are you becoming too soft? If shit were to go down, for instance, a zombie apocalypse. I know it's weird, but it's a huge thing right now. Are you someone that, could you defend yourself? Not for anything. Are you someone that someone's going to call and say, "Hey man, I need your fucking help"? Are you that person? Are you going to sit behind your keyboard and complain about shit?
It's interesting that you say that about Teddy Roosevelt, about how he's complaining about what was going on in his generation.
Oh, and that was back in the early, yeah, exactly.
Right. And what's fascinating about that is my cousin's great grandfather, who was a bigwig back in his day, in my state. He's got a peak named after him. He went and fought in World War I. And his conclusion of the result of that war was that American men in 1918 were too soft. So he went and became a scoutmaster for a local Boy Scout troop in the Yakima area to raise them. And I have a photo of this guy. And this is the face of a guy that you do not piss off. Like, he had that chiseled jaw, just no nonsense. And this is him not in his war uniform. This is him in his scoutmaster uniform. And there is even a book written about his experiences, because he would take these kids on these trips, and he was all about trying to not harden them, but like toughen them up and make them ready for the world. So Teddy Roosevelt wasn't the only person noticing that.
That's true. That's a good story.
And I think that for all the, I'm not blaming anybody for what happened back in 1909 or whenever, when Teddy Roosevelt was president and whenever this guy was scoutmaster, but they were way, way, way ahead of the curve in terms of what they saw. Because I think the problem, the curse for a lot of men, is their ability to see the inevitable conclusion of the path that they're on. And I think that they saw deep down in the recesses of their soul, they knew where things were going to go. Now, maybe they didn't know exactly what it's going to look like, because they didn't understand that obviously you can't predict technology. But I think they understood the overall idea was that men who are so weak that they wouldn't stand up for anything.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what we have today, where the fear, back Gamergate was about men who are not necessarily masculine, but they were fighting for what they valued, which was their video games. They were, but as much as anybody wants to give them grief, it's like they were the first major group to stand up against feminism.
Nobody else was doing that. That's true.
Nobody else would do it. So it was a bunch of gamers. And so that's where I have a little bit of sense of hope, in a sense where they go after certain types of things that everybody cherishes, and suddenly they find themselves on the retreat. They realize that they've tried to crank up the temperature of the pot way too fast for the frog. The frog is going to start popping. And so, like I was saying, if you try to inject any of this stuff, this nonsense into a Zelda game, or if somebody came out even now and said Zelda needs to be ended because it's sexist, I think people would absolutely flip out. I don't think people fully understand what's going on, like what the inevitable conclusion of what they believe entails. They always think, oh, it's going to mean this, and it's going to be limited, and once we've done that, then they'll be satisfied. I think that that's really what you have. You have a lot of like true believers, and then you have placaters who are like, yeah, as long as we just give them this stuff, they'll leave us alone, or they'll leave that alone.
Or they'll fuck me.
Yeah, they won't.
Because a lot of guys, that's why they virtue signal and they're allies with the feminists is because they're hoping it's going to get them laid.
Yep.
Well, they're kind of like that guy in The Mummy. You know, it's better to be at the right hand of the devil instead of in his path, right?
Oh, Benny.
Yeah, Benny. You know, it's better to be the right hand of the devil instead of in his path. And so, you know, they realize that they understand where the tide is. The problem is the tide can turn.
Yep.
But I don't know. I think that's what's really interesting about where things are going is where they're going to, and it's almost like they know if they touch a certain topic, it causes like people, it will cause not only outrage, but cause people to think, has this movement, let's say I'm being hypothetical. Let's say feminism decided to be extra special stupid and said the Legend of Zelda and Super Mario need to be banned or they need to be stopped because they're sexist. And gamers everywhere just absolutely flipped out and said, and they started to ask themselves, you know, why do we even have feminism? Like, was it even a good idea to start with? You know, we've made all these concessions over the last 30 years. Maybe it's time for us to start rolling some of that stuff back, because if they're not even going to let us have our video games, then it's like, if that's the choice we have, where we leave them alone and we lose everything we care about, or we put them in their place and we get to keep what we like. I mean, video gamers, and people are wondering what that ties into with masculinity. I think it's because video gamers have, frankly, stronger adherence to their values than a lot of these trad cons and social conservatives or whatever. Because it's like, yeah, dude, you don't touch my flipping video games. Don't touch my video games.
Right? You made a point where like we're not going to let that's been the problem over the decades is we're letting things happen.
Right.
And that's we're part of the problem when we do that.
Right. And I think the thing is, like, they do stuff and then people have got to challenge it.
Yeah.
Because they won't even say stuff. And so I think at some point they're going to hit something where I don't know what it is, but they're going to hit something and it's going to cause outrage, and they're going to try to, you know, back off. But people are going to start asking questions like, you know, if they're going to go after this, what won't they go after? And you know, do we really want these? Like, I think that's the one thing about geek culture that people don't really seem to understand. For a lot of people, that's all they have. And so when you go after that, you're threatening the only thing that they have left for themselves in this society, right? You go after the wrong thing and they'll flip out and they'll go after you and they're not going to stop. Like, you know, be careful. As somebody once said, I think it was, what was that name? C.K. Chesterton, or that famous English guy. He said, before you tear down a fence, make sure you know why it was put up in the first place. You know,
that's
like,
true.
Don't destroy something without understanding that. And so I think that's where we could see that. I mean, I'm just saying the Legend of Zelda series, to continue on with this thing, is one of the most popular video game series in the world. It's one of the most beloved. It is genuinely loved by lots of people. And so for them to go after that, I'm not saying that may ever happen. They may not be that stupid, or they may be smart enough to know what not to touch. I'm saying if they did, it would cause, my estimation is that it would cause a huge backlash, and it would cause people to seriously and openly start rethinking whether this whole, like, this stuff should even be tolerated. Like, you know, from that point on, anybody who talks about social justice in a video game is going to be suspect. And it going from like having the more, I think that's key. They will lose the moral high ground because you guys tried to kill Zelda, The Legend of Zelda. You tried to kill a very beloved, worldwide beloved video game series. You are now the bad guys. And anybody who talks even remotely like you needs to prove how they are not a bad guy.
Yeah. What do you think, Rob?
Well, to go off of, to kind of back up a little bit and go off of something that you guys both kind of said, and TJ is the one that brought it up, where you guys made the reference to the mummy, and the one guy saying something along the lines of better to be the devil's right hand than to be in his path. Unless or until there's another little saying I'm sure you both have heard that I'm a little more of a proponent to it than that particular one, which I didn't want to break anyone's train of thought, so that's why I just kind of kept my mouth shut till right now. But you've got that analogy or that euphemism or that little phrase of, the devil's hand. Mine is better to reign in hell than serve in heaven.
Somebody's read John Milton.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And I think, and this is maybe just fantasy, a flight of fancy, wishful thinking. I don't know, but I know for me personally, I definitely would be more of the proponent of better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. That I won't break before any master. I'll die first. It's like, no, you're not going to bend me. I'm not, to use the Game of Thrones, I'm not going to bend the knee.
Gotcha.
And so I think I look at myself and I don't consider myself unique or special. I'm just a dude. But I think, well, if that's kind of my thought, is better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven, and you're not going to break me, you're not going to bend me, you're literally going to have to kill me at some point if you keep going, because there will come a point where, no, I'm not budging, I'm not moving. This is, the line is here, you just stepped into it. And I think that, I hope there's other masculine men that have that same mentality, that they're kind of in that same boat, that, yeah. And so when TJ was talking about a backlash, I think we're kind of starting to see that already. And it's just like us having our talk right now. Other guys on their different social media platforms are doing the same thing, whether they're authoring books or doing YouTube videos, anything like that. I think you are starting to see the beginnings of this backlash, that there will come a point where it's going to full on come to a head, because the feminists, the leftists, the diaper core, the SJWs, they're never going to stop. Okay. That's my thoughts. You guys mentioned, like, when's enough? There's never enough. They, to use kind of a metaphorical term, they have this great big hole inside them that they're trying to fill. And they're looking externally to fill it with the outrage and with, microaggressions and all of the little, you name it, that you all know about. And my thoughts is that hole can never be filled. It's a black hole. It'll keep sucking until there is nothing left. And that includes them. It's a self-destructive path that they're ultimately on. Because if you think about it, it's like, okay, one of the current agendas is, strong, independent woman. You don't need no man because you have the state, and the state will take care of you. You get your welfare checks, you get your child support, you get all of this, and you don't need to worry about having a kid because 40 is the new 30, and biology doesn't fucking care about any of that. And women are starting to find that out as they've put off motherhood and put off rearing children and all of that, and finding out that, goddamn, this is someone lied to me somewhere. Okay. That 40 isn't the new 30, because biology doesn't give a shit. And I kind of think, good God, I'm getting wound up here. But I kind of think that you're going to see a blowback on this, because if not, I mean, look at the fact that, especially with all like the white guilt and whitey's bad, and everybody else has their week or their month of appreciation, and anyone can do cultural appropriation except the white man. I mean, going back to the very beginning with Zelda and with Nintendo, you guys are mentioning, that there are all these Japanese programmers and Japanese artists and all of that are creating these games, and then they're westernizing it. And to me, I started kind of giggling to myself, going, well, isn't that cultural appropriation? They're taking white man, the Italian Luigi and Mario, and making caricatures out of this Italian thing. Isn't that cultural appropriation? And yet I don't hear anyone squawking about that.
Yeah, but that's because we love it. I mean,
exactly,
because we know these people are lying. They're just lying. There's no word in the English tongue for people, the depth of their lies. When they say cultural appropriation, they go, how worse off. I mean, I'm not trying to be like this. Maybe this is the geek in me, but The Legend of Zelda, my life would have been worse off without that game, because the game, for me, inspired a lot of, I think, my imagination, and just, I don't know, like these video games have not, this is, again, the geeks in us. It was a pivotal part of my childhood. I remember growing up with Super Mario and all these games. And I know that it's just, so yeah, it was, okay, so what if it was cultural appropriation? It was good. I'm glad it happened, and I want to see more like it.
Sure.
So why are we making a crime of this stuff? And yeah, because The Legend of Zelda is you're taking medieval stuff, and like Japanese guys were taking it and making based on medieval, like motif. That's what it was all about. It was not based on Japanese, because then there'd be samurai guys, and Link is clearly, like, I'm not trying to get, I don't think that was ever on their minds, but just, Link and all the major characters like Zelda and all that, I understand that they're Hylian or whatever, and they're elfish, but that's based on Germanic lore. And so it's fundamentally Germanic, European, white, whatever you want it, whatever term makes you guys sleep well at night for those listening. But the idea is that they used stuff from a culture that was not theirs, and they did something very great with it that was a benefit for our culture and society. So why would you want to complain about that, unless you were just a human being who was trying to come up with something to complain about? And that's exactly what I was thinking now that you were mentioning it, where, yeah, people from a different country taking stuff that had nothing to do with theirs. But look at how popular Super Mario was.
Sure.
By taking an Italian plumber, which it's like, what? Try imagine as a Japanese guy going to your board of directors saying, we're going to make a video game based on an Italian plumber. And they're going to think, why? Oh, and we're going to have a blonde princess. And we're going to have a
turtle.
Yeah, we're going to have a big, huge turtle as the bad guy. Like,
Japanese, they ran with it.
They ran with it. And you know what? God bless them. God bless Nintendo for having the foresight to understand that. And I think that's the difference between us and not them by Nintendo. I mean, them, like the people we've been complaining about. We look at that and say, yeah, it was cultural appropriation, and it was done masterfully. God bless them. And they, like, our society and culture and our video game industry is better off as a result. Like, we are better off, at least I was in my childhood, with that stuff. So I'm not complaining. When people are always saying,
and I'm not complaining either. It's just
interesting,
kind of like what Vincent said. That we as a group, we as men, we're definitely partially to blame for all of this, because we're allowing it. And I think the biggest part of that is, and it's obviously, as you guys know, it's a complex thing. There's no simple solutions to it, but it's to me, it kind of sums up to the whole soft men create, or hard men create good times
Right.
create soft men. And we as a society, we've gotten soft and we've gotten lazy.
We're in the soft
is the-
cycle.
Yeah,
I think-
and you're gonna see the very beginnings here. I think if history kind of repeats itself, if it is cyclical, as you say, Vince, if it's a cycle, you're gonna see hard times start showing up here.
Oh yeah.
And everyone's gonna be wringing their, clutching their pearls and wringing their hands, going, "Someone save us!" And they're either gonna do what Rorschach did in Watchmen and whisper no.
No.
And let the fucking world burn, which is kind of where I'm at with it. It's like, sometimes you got to burn the village to save it, or someone's going to step up, but it's going to take a hard time to make that happen.
Well, I think what's going to happen is people are going to be forced into a corner because kind of like with gaming and all these different geek hobbies, they're escapes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's what made the Gamergate thing such a big deal. I might be onto something really ingenious here. So
cool.
I think it was because for the people who really led the backlash, that is their only escape from a world that they can't tolerate.
Well, and not only that they can't tolerate it, but that world doesn't like them either.
Right. The world doesn't like them. So, I mean, I was playing Legend of Zelda this weekend, and it was kind of an escape. It was like, yeah, this is a world that's totally different. It makes sense. There's not a lot of toxicity in the culture. It's very clear lined who the bad guys and the good guys are. Like, I can kind of understand that. The rules are clear. But for these guys, that's all they got. Like, I can go out and I can engage reasonably with the culture and society in a limited sense. But for these guys, this is all they have. So when somebody comes in and threatens that is for them, you're kind of like wanting to poke a hole in their life vest or whatever they got. And so
you're actually destroying their identity is what you're
destroying their identity. Whereas like and people are wondering, well, as opposed to these tradcons who send, they're willing to sacrifice their daughters on the altar of all this propaganda, they'll send their daughter out and mortgage their house to go send them to college and all that other stuff. Well, it's because I think that at least the gamers understand that it's all they have. Like there's nothing else. And what's going to be interesting is when they start going after, when it will be fascinating to watch. And I could be wrong, but I'm going to make a prediction. I think they're going to start going after anything nostalgic. Because
they've already started when you mentioned like the whole Mary Poppins
right,
thing.
but I think with gamers, they're going to go after Mario. And then they're going to go after Zelda. And then the gamers are going to flip out and say, don't touch.
Enough is enough.
Yeah. Don't touch Zelda. And the question at that point will be, are these SJWs dumb or smart enough to understand when they've crossed a big fat line?
They're dumb.
Because if they haven't, they're going to keep pushing forward. And so here's another thing. I've never really articulated this before, but I want to say now, the fight against these people will be led by normies. It'll be led by people because they're going to be the ones who are outraged because they weren't expecting it. It's like, wait a minute, you're going after Legend of Zelda. You want to destroy this game. Like, and it will be for them, it'll have been out of nowhere. Whereas guys like us would sound like Old Testament prophets. It's like, yeah, we've been talking about this for like 10 years.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a decade and nobody listened then. You guys all thought we were misogynists and we were kooks.
Yeah, and then they're going to turn around and the funny thing is we're going to be the voices of moderation and reason compared to what these guys are going to do. Because the gamers, can you imagine what happens when the gamers happen to be a bunch of 4chan guys? They're going to go declare war on these people, and it ain't going to be pretty. Like, I've seen what happens when the chans get unleashed, and it ain't pretty, right? They went after Shia LaBeouf, They hunted his sorry butt down in like some middle of nowhere place by identifying which plane happened to be flying over his hut or something like that. It's like, you really want to you want to go to war with these guys? I mean, God forbid a bunch of these Chans happen to be, devoted Legend of Zelda players, and you go after that. It's just like, oh, it's on. It's like the war is going to start there.
Well, that brings up an interesting question I want to ask both of you. I'm kind of, obviously this question, I'm playing devil's advocate, and it's more of a theoretical than a real, but you keep mentioning, what's it going to take for the Chan guys, if they're Legend of Zelda guys or whatever, to activate and go to war. Okay, my question to both of you, what's it going to take for you guys? What's it going to take for you to say enough's enough?
Well, I would say my response is I'm fighting, but not. I think the problem people have is they confuse fighting. I'm fighting with the mentality of an underground resistance fighter.
Okay.
I'm not fighting like I'm going to go out, because in my opinion, fighting right now is like being a Polish guy getting on your horse and charging German panzers.
Sure. Yeah. No, you're going to be outgunned and outnumbered right now.
You're outgunned and
sure.
outnumbered. So you fight a guerrilla underground movement until there's enough populist uprising against what's going on. And so for me, I'm already fighting that in my own way, the best I can. But yeah, like there's a part of me that wants to do the whole, charge out in the field in the open conflict type thing.
Right.
But I understand
that won't happen.
Yeah. Well, you lose.
You would either get arrested, and that would be best case today. Is best case you'd get arrested. Worst case you'd get killed.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
you'd be committing suicide by cop doing that.
Right? Yeah, you have to defend your property.
Right.
And for the record, I'm looking at the chats. Atham, I am not a redneck. I am a suburbanite, not a redneck.
Redneck.
And it's interesting. We got someone named Amy who said a few college girls actually did slam poetry on why Super Mario is sexist, so it unfortunately exists. Oh boy. Yeah. Thanks for letting us know, Amy. Yeah, I think it'll start at slam poetry, and then it's going to trickle down through, like, some college professor saying a bunch of nonsense, and then it's going to pass on to the students, and then those students are going to go get degrees, and then they're going to go work in the video game industry, and then they're going to be activists, and then they're going to go after someone like Shigeru Miyamoto or Koji Kanji and saying, you got to get rid of this. And that's going to be where it's going to get fascinating, because not only are you going to have the Japanese saying, we don't care, we're not one of you, but you're going to have the Chans get unleashed on these people. And I'm assuming that there's got to be at least one Chan out there who plays Legend of Zelda. And I mean, the other Chans are not going to be reluctant to like fight a war on this kind of thing. They're just looking for something to go after. And if he says, yeah, dude, they're going after like our beloved video games, they're going after, especially guys at my age, if any of them are one of these 4chan guys or 8chan guys, this is like our childhood. So, and it's like a positive part of the childhood. So especially I grew up in an intact family for a lot of those guys who didn't. Video games was kind of an escape from that. So even more of an emotional, attachment. So these people are like stepping over, they're walking through a minefield and they don't even know it.
They're playing with fire.
They're playing with fire while dousing themselves with gasoline.
Yep.
So
good
interesting
points.
times we live in, guys, for sure. Interesting times.
This is for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to it's not like this is the stuff that we don't necessarily want to talk about all the time, but it's hard to avoid talking about it because it's
everywhere.
It's like trying to talk. It's like trying to not talk about the bubonic plague in the 13th century or the 14th century, whenever, when like it was killing. It's like, you want to talk about it? It's like, Bob died along with Ryan and Brian, and Liam. They're all, bring out your dead type thing. It's like, can you talk about anything else? It's like, well, dude, that's kind of the only thing that's going on. Bring out your dad.
I'm not dead yet. I feel like going for a walk. I feel happy.
You're not going anywhere.
Oh, you're not fooling anyone.
Can't you do us a favor? I can't. It's these guys' regulation. Can't you just come back later? Oh, no, I got to deal with Robinsons. They lost 9 today.
An African swallow?
What is the velocity of an
air
unladen swallow?
velocity.
African or European?
I don't know.
Now it's devolved. It's devolved into
Monty Python, which is like the bane and scourge of womankind everywhere. I have not yet met one woman that either liked Monty Python or even got the humor in it. It's a guy thing. It is a guy thing.
Oh yeah, Monty Python and the fucking Three Stooges.
Yep.
I just like.
My thought is on that is, so I think I've said this. I have a metal plaque that says strange women lying in ponds distributing swords, basis of a system of government. That will stay regardless of what woman happens to be occupying this house. She walks in and goes, I don't get that. I don't like it. I'll be like,
it's too fucking bad.
There's 2 doors to leave this house. Which one do you want?
Don't let it hit in the ass on the way out.
My buddy got it to me for Christmas, and I loved it because we both watched it. We watched it for the same time together, and we both just lost it watching that movie in 6th grade. It was funny. Ironically, at a youth group.
So you were like 12 years old when you first saw the film, right?
Yeah.
Same with me. I was 12 the first time I saw it.
Oh my gosh. And we were just howling at everything in that movie because it was so British
ridiculous.
Humor. Yeah, that British humor.
The fucking rabbit. Look at the bones. The rabbit on the wire.
Is it behind the rabbit? No, it is the rabbit.
Rabbit.
I nearly saw my arm off. I was so scared. It give you a treatment. I'm warning you. What's he do? Nibble your bum.
What's he do? Nibble your bum. They call me Tim.
I think the best in that movie, as far as I'm concerned, is when Lancelot is attacking the castle, the swamp castle. Oh no, he goes. Oh, yeah. The father goes, "Oh, that will be our kingdom, lad." Well, the curtain. No, not the curtain. Like that chapter, the tale of Sir Lancelot, and then of course his servant gets hit with the arrow. Message for you, sir. And he's like, Concord, you shall not have died in vain. I'm actually I'm not dead yet, sir. Well, shall not have been mortally wounded in vain. I actually think I'll pull out of it, sir.
Oh, classic.
Oh gosh, that movie. I have that movie on DVD. That will never get old.
Every dude has that movie on DVD.
The only thing the only disappointing part of that film is the ending.
But yeah, when the camera crew comes in, yeah.
I get older, I kind of get it,
man. The fact that the police showed up and arrested him and shit, that was hilarious.
But I think the problem is to me, I interpret it as they ran out. Very
discordant.
Yeah, well, they ran out of like an ending, so they're like, okay, it's like what is it called? Deus Ex Machina or whatever.
Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, Deus Machina, where they just have the cops show up. Yeah, they have the cops show up as opposed to having a genuinely funny ending. I think they were just like, what are we going to do here? But we don't really have an ending to this script.
Yeah, that's
so let's just
true. It's just they kind of cobbled it together and threw that in there.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Speaking of endings, it's been 2 hours. We had a good run.
Yeah.
It's been a good talk. It's been a very lively one, a very heated one, which is always good. I'm gonna go through some show notes and come up with a nice title.
Nice.
Yes. You want to go ahead and plug anything that you're doing lately? And we didn't actually go over that in the beginning of the broadcast. Like, are you guys doing anything lately, whether it's geek or not, or anything interesting you want to tell anybody?
Well, I'll jump into that one real quick. Anyone that's watching, listening, you can find me at robsays.net, ROBSAYS.net. since I've been part of this show doing these video / podcasts, I've decided not only to do my own video podcast type of stuff where it's just me kind of bitching and moaning and rambling on, but I've already gotten my first guest done.
Oh, cool.
I have to polish up the audio because my end of it, I was very quiet as far as the volume went. And this gentleman would like me to keep him as anonymous as possible. So I need to go in and do some voice alteration on his end so that if he's, if there's people out there that he knows and they know him, they're not going to recognize that it's him. But I've got a guy that goes by RP Pragmatic on Twitter. He's dropping red pill truths all the time. He was my very first guest. Another thing I've got going on is I'm going to be hopefully it comes together tomorrow, Thursday, but I'm going to be on the Mike Kane podcast, and we're going to be discussing masculinity and my viewpoint of it and some of the stuff I've written about. I know I follow his blog and he's followed mine, and so I know he's read quite a bit of the stuff that I've got out there.
Cool.
And so that's kind of the latest thing I've got. Also, I want to extend to both you, Vincent, and to you, TJ, if the invitation is there if you want it. If not, that's fine. I would like to have you on my show so that we can talk about some of the similar stuff here that we're talking about now, but more from, I guess, my end of things of how I look at it through the red pill lens and whatnot. I'd value your guys' input and take on things and get your perspectives.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Sure.
Perfect.
Love to come on your show.
Yeah. So anyone who's listening who's interested can find me at tjmartinell.com. I do a weekly podcast called the Mountain Pass Podcast because I live unto the mountains. SoundCloud.com/tjmartinell. And as far as any geekish stuff, I'm just reading a huge book on General Patton, and I'm working out the outline for a fantasy story that was inspired by an incident when Vince and I were in Gettysburg.
Nice.
Oh, cool. We'll have to talk about our Gettysburg trip too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
that'll be fun. Absolutely. Well, and I'm going to be scouting out another battlefield gathering location for us for October, so I'll keep you guys posted.
Nice.
Yes, and obviously, Rob, you're invited to that.
Well, thank you. I would love to come out. It'd be great.
Absolutely. Geek-wise, and we already talked about this a little bit, I'm reading a book on Teddy Roosevelt, and I plan to outline that a little bit and most likely do a little article on Masculine Geek. And that's where you can find us, masculinegeek.com. Also on Twitter, masculinegeek1. We don't do too much on there at the moment, but we'll be stepping that up probably over the next couple of weeks with some things. You can also find me on vincelarosa.com, and from there you can go to my Amazon author page, which I will be releasing, hopefully, the second book in the series. I keep stalling out on the final edits, but they're almost done, and then I can work with my book cover artist and get that set up, and hopefully, I tentatively want to say this summer. So
nice.
And I have 2 other book projects that'll be wrapping up and going into the editing process as well. So a lot of writing going on, a lot of writing, a lot of reading, a lot of podcasting, all of my favorite things. Indoor favorite things. Yeah. And then once it gets a little warmer, we'll talk about outdoor things that we as masculine geeks do.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. So with that, the viewers that we had on, thank you for showing up. Thank you for joining the chat. Thank you for joining us for the 4th installment of Masculine Geek. I'll be creating a playlist for January of 2019. We'll get that up on the YouTube. And then in a day or two, I'll have this all listed up on SoundCloud as well. So if you're driving to work, driving from work, you're doing your workout, whatever you're doing, you can listen to us. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next Wednesday.